Hello and welcome to the in a series covering each of the levers in our equity growth wheel. I'm Paul Beaumont, a Client Growth Director with Equiteq, and I'll be speaking with my colleague Pat Webb. In this webinar, I'll be asking Pat to give you some insights into intellectual property. That'll take about 15 to 20 minutes, and then in the last 10 or so, I'll be putting your questions to her. So please post your questions using the control panel on the right-hand side of the screen. So Pat, perhaps you could begin by telling us what is the most important message about the IP lever?
Yes, hello everyone. Well, the key message is that well-managed intellectual property enables your firm to scale and command premium prices. Of our 8 levers of equity value, regardless of geography or sector, IP is the second most poorly performing lever. Yet we're frequently asked by the buyer community to find firms who have unique and leverageable IP. So bridging the gap between what a buyer wants and what firms offer is what we're going to cover. And even if you've no plans to sell your firm at the moment, IP is a vital enabler to help you scale your firm.
Okay, so let's put that message in context. This picture shows the Equiteq 8 levers of equity value, which we have explained in the previous 4 webinars. The important point is that it represents the key elements that a potential buyer of your firm will use to determine the level of risk when buying your firm. Pat, can you give us a specific look at the IP lever?
Absolutely. I'm sorry my screen's acting up. I have a very sensitive touch screen here. This one is talking about intellectual property. So simply put, it's knowledge that can be used to help to generate profit. Most consulting firms use a fairly loose definition of IP that basically refers to their methodologies, the way they do things. And strictly speaking, they're talking about trade secrets. So I'd like to just spend a moment before we get into this too much further and just understand the proper categories of IP so that there's no confusion. Now this slide shows the different categories, and beside it on the right there's a graduated arrow which shows that the category at the top, patents, offers the greatest legal protection, but it also costs the most to obtain and defend. Patents have legal title and can be bought and sold, and the protection usually lasts about 15 years. They're very common in pharmaceuticals and the technology industries, but very few consulting firms have this category of IP. Moving down the pyramid, a slightly larger category is trademarks, and that name, it dates back to ancient times when craftsmen used to put their signatures or marks on their products, and again, these are assets that can be sold or traded, and the duration of protection is usually about 20 years. Some consulting firms have registered trademarks on their logos and names, but many don't. Moving down the pyramid, the next largest category is copyrights. This is the legal term used to describe the rights that creators have over their works. And in a consulting firm, these may be copyrights to software programs, databases, books, technical designs, for example. The largest category at the bottom is called trade secrets. Now on the right-hand side, you'll see the legal definition of this, and it's where most of the IP in consulting firms lies. Given there's few legal protections, the onus lies with the management of the firm to protect those assets using things like non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality agreements, employment contracts, as well as other protections like passwords and restricted access. Now, IP at the top of the pyramid isn't better than that at the bottom. If the owners of the recipe for Coca-Cola or Kentucky Fried Chicken had applied for patents, they would have expired decades ago. Instead, they wisely chose to protect those trade secrets by other means. So please don't think your firm is less valuable because you don't have any registered patents or trademarks. Your firm is less valuable, however, if you don't have a set of relevant IP in the trade secrets category. And I just want to emphasize that word relevant. That's the extent to which it enables you to solve problems and therefore drive profit.
Okay, so if consulting firms' IP mostly consists of trade secrets, how do owners create well-managed IP that enables their firms to scale and command premium prices?
Right, well there's three elements that you need to manage. The first is to ensure that the IP is driven by the business strategy and that there's a well-defined process to manage it. The second is to create a high-quality inventory of different types of IP. And there's essentially three buckets. The IP that's used to market and sell your services, the IP to deliver your services, and the IP to run your business. And the third element is you have to actively manage those IP assets. So let's step through each of these elements. The first element is to ensure the IP is driven by the business strategy and that there's a well-defined process to manage it. Now here's just an example of a process. Let's start with the planning stage. You'll see on the left-hand side that the process requires input from the business plan, which feeds into the first box. So let's suppose that the business plan is to generate 15 million in revenue. The first question is, what kind of IP is needed to accomplish that? What kind of IP will be needed to market and generate demand for this service? Will there be a need for new IP to deliver the services? The leadership team has to agree the priorities for IP development, and this is a key output from the planning stage. And I'd like to make a particular point here. The priorities need to be informed by and validated with input from consultants at the coalface, marketers, sales, and the rest of the leadership team. After the plan comes the creation step, and this basically means writing stuff down. Get the IP out of people's heads and off their laptops. The format you use to capture the IP will depend on the content. It might be code for a software tool, it might be a process map if you've got a best practice approach, or a case study which highlights the benefits for a particular offering. Store and protect it. Well, I mentioned a moment ago that legal protection is weak for trade secrets, so make sure you've all that IP on a server which you control access to. If people leave, you can't run the risk that they're going to take your IP with them. So we're going to return to this later when we cover the third element in this lever. Communication. Now you have this IP. Who do you need to get that out to? There's people inside your firm who need to know, consultants who need to be trained in methodologies, for example, and there's a lot of people outside your firm, your target audience, who need to know what you can do and the benefits you can deliver. And finally, by measuring and reviewing your IP, it allows you to see patterns of revenue acceleration and deceleration in your service offerings. That informs you where to invest more, and conversely, where certain items of IP need to be retired.
Pat, you said that IP is knowledge that you use to make a profit. But how is it all structured and how does it all fit together?
Right, well don't collapse when you see this slide. I'm going to walk you through it. Take it in steps. Let's start by looking horizontally from left to right at this example. It's just a typical consultancy. On the left in the orange boxes there's lots of competencies, and these are proficiencies that you need to deliver value to a client. Examples of those are things like change management, process design, project management. These then are grouped together into different service lines, and there's 5 in this example in the brown boxes. And to the right of those are the unique value propositions. Now let's map the 3 buckets of IP onto this. IP used to deliver your services on the left. Well, there's a great shopping list of them there, methodologies, workbooks, templates, etc. This IP allows you to leverage your knowledge so that more junior staff are able to deliver high quality work. Now, not only does this drive up your margins, it also improves your ability to attract and retain staff, because everybody in the firm at all levels in the organization get to move up to a level that allows them to engage in doing valuable work that stretches them and helps their clients. On the right, IP to market your services. Well, your firm needs to attract, nurture, and convert prospects, so it requires high-quality IP to describe the benefits of using your services. And examples in the little grey box there, videos, webinars, white papers, and so on. Now, I'd like to make a couple of points about this bucket of IP. IP which demonstrates rather than asserts is more attractive. Now, what we mean by this is that it's better to show the depth of your competence rather than simply state it. So, for example, a case study explains what the client's problem was, what you did, and what the results were, rather than simply saying you're experts in a particular field. So, after this webinar, have a quick look at your website and just try and make an honest assessment about the material that you have there. Does it demonstrate or assert your value? The other point I'd like to make about this group of IP is that high quality IP is relevant to existing clients too. Giving them something like IP with new insights on a problem or emerging trends, it makes it easier for you to re-engage with existing clients. And that way you become a source of ongoing value. So when you come to sell your consultancy, why do potential buyers care about this bucket of IP to market your services? Well, because it demonstrates that your firm has domain expertise, you have thought leadership, you're not a me too kind of a firm.
So it's clear that to grow the firm and ultimately sell, owners should manage the IP to deliver and market their services. But what exactly is in the third bucket of IP, the IP to run the firm, and to what extent are buyers interested in that?
Yeah, the IP to run the firm, that's essentially about enabling the owners to make the best use of resources, money, people, time. And on the right are some examples of items in that bucket. There's the business plan, which obviously breaks down into a series of other documents like sales forecasts, compensation plans, budgets, resourcing, recruitment plans, subcontractor databases, competitor analysis. Then to manage your prospects and clients, the IP includes things like key account plans, CRM data for prospects and contacts. And to manage the firm, then there's a set of IP around governance. And that includes finances, shareholdings, and employment contracts. Now, would a potential buyer of your firm be interested in this particular bucket? Well, you might have heard that phrase. It's often said that buyers buy management teams first and consulting teams second. That comment reflects the ability of management teams to scale their firm and navigate through the stages of growth. What's in the plan? Can this management team grow it year on year with 20% net profits? Is the plan on track? Evidence of that lies in this bucket.
Okay, so we've said there are three elements in the IP lever. One, ensure the IP is driven by the business strategy and there's a well-defined process to manage it. Two, create a high-quality inventory of different types of IP. And three, manage the IP assets. What insights can you give us into that third element, Pat?
Right. There's essentially two parts to managing the IP assets. There's a knowledge management part and a knowledge engineering part. So if we start with the knowledge management, there needs to be an individual on the leadership team who's responsible for IP. And they have to exercise executive direction, which means defining the IP framework, ensuring the IP is driven by the business strategy, and that there's a well-defined process to manage it. And when the time comes to retire that IP. They also have to make sure that sufficient consultant time is ring-fenced to create IP. the IP has to be disseminated to delivery teams, and so the member of the leadership team who's responsible for IP has to manage that, and for ensuring effective training regimes are in place to upskill consultants. And obviously we all know how frustrating it is when we can't get our hands quickly on all this excellent IP. So of course you need to make sure you store it in an accessible system with easy to follow structures and really good search capabilities. And of course you need to make sure that access is controlled so that your IP remains safe and up to date. Now that point about up to date leads straight into knowledge engineering. It's essential that every component of the IP framework is owned by a subject matter expert who's responsible for assuring the quality of the content. In order to capture all the best knowledge in the firm, you have to make sure that everybody contributes to the content, but that gatekeeper, they have a crucial role in maintaining the quality of it. And the other point just to make here is there's in fact two types of knowledge, explicit and tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is formal and systematic, and that stuff's relatively easy to document. It's basically the way you describe how you do stuff. Tacit knowledge, on the other hand, it's not so easily expressed. It incorporates all the things you just kind of know from long experience and practice. You have to pass on that tacit knowledge through knowledge sharing sessions, through mentoring and ongoing coaching.
Pat, in your experience, how successful are consultancies at engineering and managing both explicit and tacit knowledge?
Yeah, most firms, Paul, most firms have made a reasonable stab at engineering and managing explicit knowledge, because that stuff is, they know it's important and they have a skill set to do that. What they're much less good at is doing the same thing with tacit knowledge. In order to get leverage from your IP, you need both. Otherwise, you can't be confident that your junior staff will be able to deliver quality results if they only have the explicit knowledge.
That's great, Pat. Thank you. I'd now like to put a few questions to you that have come in from the listeners. The first one asks you, it says, can you talk a little more about the need to protect IP trade secrets and yet still provide the depth of information in the materials to market and deliver the services?
Right, well, I think maybe I'll take that question in two parts. Protect it and still go out with the marketing.
Yeah.
And if I may, I'll take the second part first, like the going out with the marketing of it. Delivering, making available either through website downloads or material that you actually send to your clients, high quality articles, presentations, downloads, reports, and so on. There's that old adage about, you know, if I can keep drinking the milk from the cow, why should I buy the cow? Because you're demonstrating that you really do have a lot of domain expertise. That's that demonstrate rather than assert. So there is a large percentage of your IP, well, which you want to have ready access to. So that's the first part. You don't want to control access to that. You want that out there. On the other part of the question about how do we control access to trade secrets? Excellent point. You really have to get that stuff in place first of all about who needs to know, who needs to have that knowledge, who needs to access it and in what formats, and particularly this point about who controls version numbers and so on. So that's something that the individual who's charged with responsibility for managing IP has to get their head round. And as I mentioned at the beginning, non-disclosure agreements, employment contracts, non-compete clauses if people leave your firm, making sure that it's clear to consultants what, you know, that what is allowed to be stored on laptops and what isn't, what has to be stored centrally because it's an asset of the business. All of that has to be explained to people and then it has to be enforced. So those would be the two the ways that I would answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. And I guess we could add that technology that's available today certainly makes some of that protection and access an awful lot easier than it used to be. The second question we've got, Pat, is we have lots of ideas for new service offerings. How do we prioritise the ones to work on?
Oh, gosh, that's another great question. Oh, and one very close to my heart. Okay, so let me break this apart. New service offerings require new IP, and creating that takes a lot of time and money. And although it may be kind of, you're not actually spending money with a supplier, it's taking a lot of time and money because consultants are working on that, they're not out delivering. So we want to make sure that you get the best possible return for your investment. So the first thing is I'd suggest you start looking at the market for this service offering. How large is it? How easy would it be for you to access? How competitive is it? Then have a look at your right to win in that space with this new offering. Would you be credible? Would you actually be capable of delivering it? And finally, have a look at the cost of development. How long would it take? Could you do it all in-house? Generally speaking, I'd be inclined to develop a new service line that reinforces your focus and builds on what you're already good at, rather than getting into new service offerings that would take you into a brand new area, doing something you've never done before. And you know, another point on this, test. You have to test your service offerings as soon as possible with new clients, even before they're fully developed, because you have to check the appetite for buying it. Just because you find it interesting doesn't mean other people will. Your clients, your prospects will. So if it feels like it's a tough sell, you're wading through treacle, just, you know, kill it quickly.
Excellent, thank you. And talking of killing IP, another question we've had is, says, you mentioned retiring old IP. Really?
Yes, really, yeah. It's time. Well, how do you know when it's time to retire IP? Well, when it's not making you any money, or when it isn't differentiated and you become me too. Lots of consultancies surf in on the wave of a new way of doing things, a new theme, a new methodology, whatever. Ultimately, that breaks across the market. Clients implement the new way of doing things and the market dries up. In larger consultancies, there's a great deal of intention about having service offerings at different stages. You know, that Porter model, you know, you want some rising stars, you want a lot of cash cows, and there will be a few dogs. So the IP that underpins those poor dogs is the material that needs to be retired.
Okay, thank you. The next question we had is one that I think a number of our clients have asked us before. It says, when we use subcontractors and they create IP, to whom does it belong?
Oh gosh, another great question. It's another it depends answer rather. The first point to make is it's really, you have to be on top of this question before there's a problem, because after that, when you're into disputes, that can become extremely time draining and emotionally draining for both sides of this. So you have to make sure that trade secrets, because they have few legal protections, this is discussed up front, and get your agreements in writing on ownership, on access, and on non-compete issues.
Okay, so out before it becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we've probably got time just for one last question, Pat, and it's this one. How important are links to academia?
Well, you know, it really depends on your target audience and the type of consultancy you do. As a general point, yes, it helps to have external accreditation from some independent body that's seen as authoritative, but that could be an industry body. So it depends on who your target audience is and the type of work you do, but it's a good thing.
Okay, well, we're pretty well out of time, Pat.
Okay, so I just want to squeeze in a last thought. Okay. We want, and I apologize that we've had lots of jumping around on my screen. So for those of you who are still able to see the right things in the right order, I just want to squeeze in this last thought. What we've done in each of these webinars is grouped our things we suggest you do as homework within start, stop, and continue strategies. Start by give accountability for IP to a member of your senior management team. When I meet with management teams and our clients, I always ask who's responsible for sales, and there's a few hands go up. And when I ask who's responsible for delivery, there's a lot more hands go up. But when I ask who's responsible for IP, well, everybody exchanges glances, and usually the answer I get is, well, we kind of all are. Well, that doesn't work. Having listened to this webinar, can you please make a note to give that accountability, that responsibility to somebody on your team? The stop, well, stop treating IP development as a luxury you can't afford. It's the basis of high fee rates, of getting good leverage, so good margins, and differentiation as you grow, and it'll push the value of your firm towards premium prices when you decide to sell it. The continue, obviously we want you to continue to deliver great benefits to your clients. Just write that down. Make sure that you can get that information captured. And in practice meetings and knowledge sharing sessions, you have to do that so that others can leverage that knowledge to grow your firm.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pat. Now, those of you who are listening, if you posed a question which we didn't have time to answer, then we'll get back to you after the event. And if you'd like to discuss the webinar or any aspect of our growth and sale plans with us, then please don't hesitate to contact us. If you aren't already a member, then please do join our Equiteq Edge Club. It's a free source of information for consulting firm owners looking to grow and sell their businesses. And you'll find expert guidance, unique research, guest articles, and lots more, including a monthly newsletter. So thank you to everyone for attending. Next week we will be talking about the sixth lever, which is sales and marketing processes. So please do check out our website for all of our webinars and to register. Thanks again for joining us, and goodbye for now.